I think
Here for Digital Circus.
I think he rambled a little bit. Oh. Booed this man.
Yeah. Have fun roasting me in the comments. I'm sure I deserve it. But as the lone hater island in a sea of praise, I'm just gonna say my piece and move on. If you like
Here's
the
someone
show,
with a different
good for
opinion.
you.
I'm ready for this.
Like, I'm genuinely happy people are enjoying this thing. I hope we get more of it, and it can probably win me over later. But for a litany of petty reasons, this pilot just wasn't it for me. As all of its attempts to
It didn't have to be it for many people, let's be honest.
And all of its attempts to show off what an unsettling existential nightmare this place is, just come off sounding the same to me.
And into the cellar you go. Ooh, nightmare fuel.
Before we get into the things people will beat my ass about, I will give this show its flowers first. Starting with the voice cast. Everyone in this show is doing a fan-fucking-tastic job here. Lizzie Freeman is adorable as Pond Man, capturing that sense of panic and denial that just drips out of every pore of this character. They are a fantastic lead. And Michael Kovac is also here, who continues to be the good luck charm and MVP of YouTube pilots. Though honestly, he is so talented, I'm almost a little bit mad whenever he shows up in one of these things, as he feels long overdue to have a big break in some major animated property versus just being the king of indies. But if he's having fun and being well paid, let him do him.
Gotcha.
Oh. Sean Chiplock as Kinger was also a standout. Jax is cool and sassy and all, but Sean's delivery as Kinger is what actually slayed me in this episode. And I'd be remiss.
Did he
if I
say
didn't bring up
slayed
Alex
me?
Rockin as
Ew.
Spamton. Oh, sorry, I forgot. We're calling him Kane here, as this is most definitely not Spamton. G. Spamton.
Hey, it's me, Spamton. Geez, Spamton. You parasites!
Also, though, Alex is perfect casting for this type of character. I've been a fan of his work for a while now, so it's actually really cool to see him here. Amanda and Ashley also kill it here, and we of course can round out the cast with an animation staple of the show's creator doing a funny voice.
But what are they?
I'm glad you asked, Bubble. They're small.
And what do they do?
They...
How do they?
Everyone here is earning their full paycheck on this one. Not a bad line read in the room. So when the comedy doesn't land, you know it's just the writing. But in other positives, this show looks amazing.
Although the
Aaron
writing's
Timmer's
pretty
animation
good.
style is on full display here, and I love all the different ways the team play around with the appearance of the characters. From Pippi, I mean, Pawnee's eyes
Abby,
filling
you
out the sketchy squiggles.
Abby followed.
Jack's having this smug smile on his face even when things are clearly getting out of hand. The character animation on everyone is top notch. You could watch this show silent and still basically understand who these characters are and what's going on for most of it. I also really enjoy how the show handles the glitching of its characters, as it really reminds you of a computer breaking down while it's trying to run a video game, with assets not doing what they're...
Oh, what's going on here?
supposed to, glitching out, stuttering, stopping, sometimes just flat out disappearing. It fully sells that this is a digital world on some low-res computer somewhere, and it is struggling. But it's able to do so without ever looking...
You know what game it reminds me of? Reminds me of
messy or too ugly, which is a skill. On a technical level, I love almost everything.
Roller
that
Coaster
this title is
Tycoon.
doing.
I used to play
Some
Roller
of the stuff
Coaster
might be the
Tycoon
first
classic, not
obvious
classic, but the
choice.
original
Doesn't
one
mean it's not
on an
good,
old
just a
computer, and
little
it definitely
predictable.
reminds
So
me of
which
that.
brings up my biggest issue, which is anything that I don't really care for is mostly a mix of personal preference and obvious bias. Everyone who worked on this is on their A game, so I'm sure I'm the problem. But I truly do love the subtle details of this pilot. Arguably, it's in those details I think that it shines the most, more so than the bigger beats. Like how the show begins on a Nintendo 64 style game screen with square ratio and all, only for us to go into the computer leading to the screen to expand, while the obvious pixels get replaced with the show's actual art style. It's a great way to show us actually entering the digital world, as if this shitty low res is what we could see if we were on the outside, with a roly-poly-oly style theme song getting carefully messed with to show us that this song is both diegetic, happening in the story, and there is something seriously off here. From them needing a standee for a missing member to the glitch and complete repetition of this line. They could have just kept going or used the stuff cycling to get the same idea across, but cutting the same footage each time and being so obvious about it, it adds to the glitchy nature of the world. How people are trapped here.
Because
and
of
how
what it's
everyone is
running
edging
on.
madness as they are dealing with it well. One choice speaks volumes, and the little things are what I really appreciate about this thing. You can tell a lot of thought went into the presentation on taking this kids show type world and making it feel just like it's trying to be comforting, and that just makes it even more off-putting. And also has to be mentioned, the characterization is also very good. I've seen versions of these characters before. However, I enjoy all of them. And I love how you can just tell everyone's desperately trying not to go insane, with everyone using a different coping mechanism for the existential nightmare that they found themselves in. Jax is a prick who's given up on getting out and pretends not to care, with his only real joy in the world being messing with his friends, as in this digital nightmare, that is the only real interaction and response he can get out of anything anymore. Meanwhile, Zubul is just depressed and apathetic. Kinger is a paranoid, nervous wreck who somehow is still here. Gangle is a crybaby who can barely function. Ragatha is trying to be optimistic and normal, but is really kind of going through the motions too, with her starting to crack under the slightest amount of self-reflection, being the most okay with doing Kane's games, with Kane himself also not being okay, as he's drowning his guests in activities to try and keep them stimulated and distracted, also that they don't spiral and go mad like so many of them have before. We don't know if he's the full villain yet, but for the moment, it feels like he's just as trapped here as with everyone else, with him forcing positivity rather than risk people processing what's happened to them. Nobody here is doing well, and I love that. Okay, all set? Let's get to my issues. And let's start with the big one that makes the most sense before I steadily get more and more pedantic. This show has been described
going
as
on?
I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream with the aesthetic of an I Spy book. Two books that I actually love, and I can see myself adoring this show. But from just the pilot, I was left thinking that it is just okay. It's a great concept with all right execution and a lot of great polish, with the biggest source of discontent for me being how I never really buy into like the psychological horror of just being here.
What did any of that mean?
Like it's there. It's trying. My God, is it trying?
I don't
The phrase that
I don't
comes to
think
mind
it's
when I'm
supposed
trying
to be
describe these
scary.
moments for me is performative existentialism. This show is great at planting little things to unsettle you, but every time it goes for the big swing, it always feels like a bit.
We stay right here, where I can keep my hundreds of all-seeing eyes on you.
I know this is a dark comedy, but every time it tries something like this, the vibe it gives off is...
Meh.
Ooh, implications. Ooh, liminal horror. Like, I feel like I'm laughing at it rather than with
I
it
definitely
here.
feel that, yeah.
The show wants to press upon us so badly what a horrific existence it would be to be trapped in this world. But for me, I'm kind of just sitting here thinking about how unserious this feels. As yeah, it's a terrible situation. I kind of figured that out in the first 3 minutes. Nobody's handling it well here, but between the moments of horror that are beat for beat the exact moment you'd expect, slow zooms in as their mind breaks from the realization only to pull back with
They
a
did do
jet,
that a little
not to
too
mention
much.
a hallway exit scene that feels like it is on its knees praying, begging, desperately asking for you to ask questions about what's going on. What's that computer mean? What's CNA? What's the spoiler? What the fuck is in the cellar? It takes me out. I don't hate it, but my
I
honest
like the fourth
takeaway
wall
is,
breaks.
oh, look how hard it's trying, which is just so condescending on my part. But I am struggling to explain why I just feel so detached. This just keeps me from engaging with the story on its level and what it's trying to do. I think part of my unseriousness is that within this pilot, I struggle to have any sense of danger. There's fun slapstick to it, but I kind of struggled to register any of this as a threat. As in the moment, but especially in hindsight, the story just keeps taking me out of it and just showing there's not much threat here. And that just leaves the lukewarm comedy, as you realize that the only real danger for these characters is the abstraction, as giving up and going insane. The abstraction beat the hell out of Rackety, but despite a royal ass whooping and glitching out, which does seem painful, but it's kinda unclear if the abstraction can actually kill them, as we never see an abstraction destroy an NPC or glitch out something to an unrecognizable state or absorb it into itself. Instead, it just looks like it hurts. Kane can snap his fingers and fix them physically, so really this brings back the focus on the character's mental state. That the only way for these characters to go is for their minds to break, to give up, and for them to forget who they are as they lose all sense of themselves, devolving into these frustrating monstrosities that can only lash out. So unless that aspect is dug more into, and we watch someone start to slip and for it not to be done with a wink, the threat isn't there to actually get me to care. I like the characters, but it's so early I don't actually care if any of them die. And the glowing B-plot kinda sucks. It represents the lame adventures Kane will make them do and how they are literal time killers, but this B-plot exists solely to provide a cutaway
I mean,
for Pomni's story. And
having
it really
literal
feels like
time
that's
killers
not the case.
is a
And
good
all
way
this
to
just
keep
has
the
this
show
combined
running.
knock-on
Like,
effect of making it
honestly.
hard for me to actually care whenever it tries to unsettle me. It's more cute that it's trying than anything else. Maybe I'm just existentialism poisoned, as so many shows are making it a major theme right now. It'll probably hit better if you're new to these types of shows, but my takeaway is that while I appreciate what it's doing and how it's doing it, I can never shake the sense of performativeness, that it's trying too hard, and the whiplash between dark comedy and this situation left me sitting on the sidelines rather than being engrossed in what's happening. So if I don't find it uproariously funny and the psychological horror is just then all I have left is the intrigue of what's gonna happen to these characters and the associated nightmare feel that comes along with it, which I'm unsure of how much they're actually gonna delve into these characters and which part of them is just gonna be chalked up to a joke. It's really just all possibilities at this point, so for better and for worse, the story just has little to offer me at this point. But now to move on to something less controversial, I hate looking at the tent. This pre-K McPlay Place oversaturated visual vibe
I hate the
kinda
tent
drives
too.
me insane. Like, they
It's too
really
colorful.
did a
I
good
said
job
this
designing
when I
this
watched
place.
the show
It's that
originally,
perfect I Spy kid show
that
environment
it
that's meant to
seems
look friendly, but only makes
like
you feel
kiddish.
crazier sitting there. But for me, the problem comes from the fact that I find it really distracting half the time. There's so much going on in this background. There's so many colors, so many things going different ways. I feel like the show half the time doesn't do enough to bring focus back to what I'm supposed to be looking at. My uneducated guess is that the lack of detail in intentionally bright colors make it so that the soft blur that they do to delineate what's in the foreground and the background doesn't do enough. As instead, it kind of still looks like it's in focus even when it's actually not. Meaning that all these wide shots feel like that they have way too much going on, which is something I can also say about Kane's design.
I hate Kane's design too.
Okay, now the real hill I'm about to die on, for basically no reason. But for as fun as the eyes and the mouth look is, I often found it more distracting than anything else. Yeah, some real artistry went into making these teeth emote. Yeah, put it all in the comments, I won't read any of them. But for me, years of masking has set me up to make just way too much eye contact. So when Kane's on screen, I always feel like I have to be focusing on the eyes. But since he's talking most of the time, and yeah, he is probably, like, he's not my least favorite character, I do feel like he's the one whose comedy and just bit misses the most for me. Half of that is intentional.
It's
but he
supposed
is
to be
the one
all
character
fourth
I'm like,
wall
okay,
break.
this is more cringe than cute. But when he's talking most of the time and I'm staring at those eyes, what I'm focusing on is interrupted by his teeth moving around and just getting in the way of my point of focus. So I pull back to watch the teeth actually say the thing, only for that to lead me to drift back towards the eyes again, and rinse and repeat. I feel like I never know what I'm supposed to be looking at with this guy other than the nebulous everything. Kane feels like he was a really fun character to animate, but this eye-mouth situation is my personal hell, and it feels a little bit like I'm watching anime with
I don't like it.
subtitles. We're at a point I'm
I
not
agree
really
with him.
watching what's going on, but I am. But I'm not, since my focus is constantly being split. This is a me thing, sue me. So overall, this pilot, while promising,
I can't
just
watch
didn't
some with
hook me.
subtitles.
I think it's adorable, and you can tell a lot of effort by a lot of talented people went into making it, but to me, it's just fine. cute enough, chuckled maybe once every 5 minutes. Would watch a full season, but I'm not holding my breath for it. And if you liked it, there's something wrong with you. But no, seriously. I'm really happy that people are loving this pilot more than I am, as really, that's more important than my personal enjoyment. And to be honest, I rarely go out to convince anyone of anything when I make my YouTube videos. As to me, the internet is a hellscape where no one has ever been convinced of anything via comments. If your mind was changed, kind of likely you were already looking for this opinion, or it already was feeding into your preconceived biases. So when I do videos, it's just me giving my thoughts and experience, not some objective manifesto. I think, despite what this kind of rubs me the wrong way about this thing, I do think that the pilot is good. I just didn't connect with it, as when I see it, I'm just reminded by a smattering of other things that I like more, in a plot that I've never been in love with, as there's always like 3 answers to the big overarching mystery. While I'm only passively curious about what's gonna happen next, other people are loving the fuck out of this thing. They're hooked by the idea of what this place is and what will happen next. That every joke that I shrugged at busted their guts. This thing was so popular that it pretty much buried the Hazbin Hotel's trailer, just conversation-wise, the weekend it came out. Which is proof that the amazing digital circus is the new hotness. But it's just alright to me. But I'm pretty confident that Gooseworks is cooking, and the show will win me over if and when it keeps going, with my half-curious questions being turned into actual investment and intrigue to the greater mysteries of the show, or just entertainment at watching all these yahoos get tortured. I think it deserves that much, and while I'm not gaga for it, I do think I understand why so many people fell in love with it. Just wasn't for me. Thank you all for watching. This has been Sarcasm.
Yeah, that was good. I agree with this opinion. I don't think it was as good as has been, but I think it was freaking funny.